This is episode 4 of the Rapper and Pastor Show. My name is Brian Jones. I am the pastor.
And I am Reby Versus. I am the rapper.
And in this episode, we want to talk about entertainment and popular culture and how as Christians we interact with popular culture. We begin with an article about Beyonce's Black is King, her new visual album, which came out apparently earlier this year. And in this visual album, Beyonce calls herself, she says, I am the Nala, sister of Naruba, Osun, Queen Sheba, I am the mother.
Yeah. Nala is actually, in the visual, in the Black is King visual, it's a lot of correlations to the Lion King story. So if you ever seen the Lion King, Nala is her character in the movie, right. And Nala is also, Simba's love interest and his best friend as they were growing up. So that's a parallel, So the problem with the other names are these are actual deities that are worshipped in the Benin area, in the Togo area, and they are the Yoruba religion. It's basically a pantheon of gods, similar to, Greek mythology or any kind of mythology where there's a supreme deity. He created the minor gods, and the minor gods had part in creating man. How it goes in this tradition, it was a creator god. His name was Abtala. He was in heaven, and he was trying to figure out why he was so bored in heaven, right? So he's like, I'm bored. Everything's going on up here, but I'm bored. So he went to other wise gods, and to figure out what he can do about his boredom. So what he does is these gods, one god in particular, the wisest god, tells him to, you could go down to earth and create. They tell him to get a golden rope, a black cat, a chicken, in some of the stories, it's a 5-toed chicken, and they tell him to get either red dust or sand. So he takes the golden rope and he lowers the rope down to earth. He looks down on the earth and there's no form, it's just water. So he throws the sand down on the water. He has the chicken, he places the chicken on the sand. The chicken starts to peck at the sand, and dry land appears. So this is where the earth is created, and the black cat is supposed to be his companion. So he has the black cat as his companion. So he gets to earth and he's created. Oh, also he had to get a palm tree nut. I forgot about that, a palm tree nut. And when he gets to earth after the chicken spreads the dry land, he plants the palm seed. The palm seed trees spring up, and now he has like what we would call Eden. He has illustrious, fertile land where he is, and he gets bored. He's down there. He's still bored. He starts to create man, but he starts drinking some of the wine that's produced from the palm nut trees, and he gets drunk. So while he's creating, he gets drunk and he falls asleep while he's creating. He wakes up. One of the elder gods came down. One of the other gods came and seeing that his work wasn't finished, he wakes up. So he starts to create. He wakes up and he sees that the ones that he created were deformed because he was drunk while he was creating them and he fell asleep. So the other God pretty much helps him, fashions him. And there's a contrast in between, what Christians believe. We believe that God created us in his image, created man in his image, and everything was good. But in contrast, in a lot of these creation stories, man is not good. It's always something wrong with him. He's either wicked or he's deformed, like in this case. So there's parallels in a lot of these creation stories, but there's also very stark contrast. But where Beyonce's character comes in is Oshun, and she is the goddess of the river and of love and of beauty. She's also the goddess of revenge. But in the main role, in the role that Beyonce seems to be taking on, is that she's the mother goddess. So in one of the legends or mythologies, she comes, man is still, he doesn't have love, or man doesn't have compassion. So she is the god of that, and she gives man compassion and teaches them, love and compassion. And she's also the goddess of witchcraft. So she teaches the women witchcraft and divination. Throughout the whole Black is King video, she's embodying this character. Going back to the conversation we had last week about how sports, it has its good things, but then sports also has its bad things when Christians elevate it over the God we love. It's similar in the fashion to when we relate to pop culture, because these images are in pop culture, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about Beyonce now, but there's many things that we can point out in pop culture where we see these elements of other God worship, elements of just vulgarity, or messages that do not align with Christian principle, Christian morality, Christian ethic. You can consume it from a certain level, you know what I mean? But you have to be careful what you're consuming and how much you're consuming as a Christian. And this is why I always tend to educate myself in what's going on. Some of it is because I like comparative religion, period. Like, that's just what I do. I study it. So I can see these things happening when I see it in culture. We got to be careful what we're doing with culture. So as a pastor, what is some of the ways you, or some of the things you do to kind of guard yourself or guard your parishioners from the things that's going on in the culture?
Something this overt is like the kind of popular culture I consume, I guess, is usually doesn't identify with false religion quite so overtly.
Right.
Either the message is more subtle than this, or there's a blending together where sometimes you'll see Christians say, well, this person in this movie, this character in this movie or whatever, functions as a Christ-like person. Like, they sacrifice themselves for others. But there's also other elements in that kind of, those kind, like, let's say we're talking about a movie, there are other religious elements that are there that maybe if you're not familiar with those religions, you don't see the Hindu elements or the Buddhist elements or whatever. So the challenge is to engage or consume popular culture critically, but also not to, I don't think you have to become an expert in every religion or every philosophy to be properly critical as you consume pop culture. But I think there is a tendency, especially if you're not aware of the elements of other religions or false ideologies or whatever, if you're not aware of those, you can sort of accept them passively, and they become part of your worldview or even part of your thinking about Christianity, without you even realizing how much you've been influenced by them.
Would you say, because I think I found this to be helpful, the more we learn about our own faith, the more we can notice things that are foreign to the faith, if that makes sense. Like, the more and more we learn about what we believe in, then we can see that there are certain elements coming in that are not related to what we necessarily believe in. And I think if Christians became more knowledgeable about the religion in and of itself, because a lot of Christians is just surface level, is just and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I do believe that Christians have to dig deeper into their faith because of some of these things that are covertly being introduced to us through pop culture.
Yep.
Would you say that's a proper assessment of the situation?
Yes, and I think the challenge is we all have a limited amount of time, and so the more time you spend consuming pop culture, to
Mm-hmm.
some degree, the less time you spend studying the faith and like enriching your own walk with Christ, through the Word and through prayer and through fellowship with other Christians. And so it's like a lot easier to just pop on a music video or
Mm-hmm.
whatever than it is to open the Bible and engage with that, right? And so
Right.
I think the temptation for all Christians, probably to some degree, who engage in popular culture, is not to let the consumption of popular culture consume all of your available time, so that it
Mm-hmm.
squeezes out your understanding of theology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there any element of pop culture that can be uncritically, consumed?
No,
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that?
there isn't really any aspect of Christian theology that can be uncritically
Right. Right.
consumed. We have to, the scripture commands us um, to study all things. I'm forgetting the exact wording of the verse here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
hold fast to what's good and
Yeah.
flee from every form of evil, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's telling us we have to sift through everything we consume,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's even like in conversing with another brother in Christ, like you and I are doing.
Mm-hmm.
We have to think about what is being said by the other believer
Mm-hmm.
as to whether it's biblical or not.
Right.
Going back
Right.
to our conversation about the call to the ministry, you and I actually engaged in some dialogue about that, because we had
Right.
different ideas about what it means to be called to ministry
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
both in our background. So
Right.
yeah, I think that everything needs to be consumed with some level of discernment. Let's put it that way. It's a less
Yeah.
negative word than
Yeah.
criticism.
Yeah. Criticism.
So, yeah, I don't think there are any aspects of anything, culture included, that we can uncritically or undiscerningly consume.
This is a part of the conversation that I think we struggle with,
Yes.
because no one really wants to do that amount of thinking when it comes to their entertainment.
Right.
We just want to be entertained. That's the mindset that we bring to entertainment, but I think that's a dangerous mindset, because entertainment, the very, definition of it is to detain you. It's like to take your attention. So anything that we feel is worthy of our attention, I think we should actually know what it is that we're engaging in, because once something has your attention, no matter if we like it or not, it's teaching you something. Like,
right.
Nothing that anybody produces, any kind of art, I make music, right? Any kind of art that I make, I know intentionally what I'm trying to put in my art. No matter if it's covert, no matter if you can hear it clearly or not, I know intentionally what I'm trying to create with this artwork. So anybody that takes the time, like, guys go to school for this. Like,
yeah,
they've been doing this for their whole whole adult life. They've gained the expertise to be able to put things in their art. So I don't think it's wise for us to sit back and just not critically look at things when everything is trying to teach you something. Every piece of art we look at, it has a theme and it has a message and it has a story. It has something in it that's trying to influence you. And I think some of it is more easily noticed than others, but that's because I think, or harder to notice than others, but that's because I think we're not familiar enough with our faith to be able to pick up on it when we see it.
Yeah, and I think too that, and speaking for myself, but I don't think that I'm alone in this. Like, you almost want to turn off your filters when you're consuming popular culture, right? Because especially if your work or your ministry requires you to be thinking and evaluating ideas all the time, you kind of want to give that part of your brain a rest when you're consuming a story. You just want to be immersed in the story and not necessarily be picking it apart. I'm much less aware of even things like swearing in a video. Like, if I'm watching a video on YouTube, like I'll watch it and I'll think it's good, and then I show it to my kids and I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even notice how often
Yeah.
the person in the video was, was using foul language.
Right.
So this has happened to me more than once, and I think it just illustrates the idea that, because like using curse words is not a temptation for me. It's not like it's not a problem with my sanctification. And so I don't like hearing them, but it's not the only factor I would consider in whether or not I would consume media. But when you don't want your kids to develop habits of thinking and speaking that are perverse in one way or another. Let's talk about Beyonce here a little bit. Is it possible that she is just looking for an interesting character to frame her music, her art around, and that's all this is? Or is there actually an overt theology to it?
I believe it. I believe so, because one of the messages that she conveys is this constant theme of the Black man actually being a king. Mm-hmm. And not just a regular king, but a divine king that she created. So that's the theme. So there's a theology behind that. And what's happening in the Black community is that the Black community is kind of going away from Christianity, and they're starting to adopt the old African religions. You know what I mean? So she's intentional in this, because some of the lyrics she says is encouraging Black men and Black individuals to come back to their native religions. And I think that's why she's trying to embody this goddess, because just speaking historically, right? Most of us who are in slavery comes from the area she's talking about. The Togo tribe, the Igbo tribe, from the areas of Benin, Nigeria, that's Nigeria now, Western Africa into Central Africa, the Congo. This is where we come from. So when she's talking about this religion, this used to be our religion before. Now the Congo was already Christianized. It was already Catholic. Well, even African Christianity had been there. There had been Africans that were Christian, but for the most part, this area in which she's talking about, worship these goddesses, these orishas. That's what they're called. So and then even now, like where you get voodoo or hoodoo or what's the Santeria, like when these religions are rooted back to their African is rooted in their African ancestry, because these were the religions that they brung over, when they came to the Americas, and they mixed it with Christianity, and that's where you get voodoo and hoodoo and Santeria from. This is just Catholicism mixed with the worship of the Orishas, and they just replaced it. Like there's a overt, theology that they're trying to convey. You know what I mean? That's not something I'm just saying. The lyrics of her songs, she's expressing that. You know what I mean? So it's not covert at all. And I think what she's trying to do is what they're trying to do, and it just goes along with the whole culture that's going on today, the whole Black Power thing, and the white man's God and Christianity, things I've heard growing up my whole life. They forced this religion on Black people. Black people would have never known who Christ was if it wasn't for the white man. So this is your original theology, and you need to come home to it. So that's the overall message of what Beyonce is trying to convey in this visual.
And so this is one of the biggest threat that popular culture has for anyone, is that it drives cultural change.
Yes.
Generally speaking, it changes. It not only, in some degree, it reflects the culture, but more often than that, in my experience, it changes culture. It drives.
Yes.
It puts out new ideas for people and mainstreams those ideas, or at least attempts to, or at least makes them possible. Culture is really it's a hard thing to define. Like I tried to define it, and I looked up in a dictionary what it was, and I didn't think the
Yeah.
dictionary definition was very good. Try this on. Tell me what you think about this. This is kind of like me. This is my writing, but obviously I'm drawing from source material.
Right.
What is culture? Culture is, I would say, the unwritten menu. I used to have the word rules in there, but I took it out and I changed
Yeah.
it to menu. The unwritten menu of human society, providing people with rules and norms for what is acceptable or unacceptable, what is fashionable or unfashionable, and then gives people options for enjoyment and entertaining themselves in their lives.
Right.
So on the menu, just like when you go to a restaurant, you can order one item or multiple items. You're
Right.
probably not going to order every item on the menu. I've never seen anybody do that.
Right.
But you can
Right.
order more than one item. But even the most expansive menu has limits to it.
Right.
And so that's kind of what culture is. It's saying you can design a life, you can choose items off of this menu and cobble together a life that is entertaining and interesting to you, but the culture tells you what's in and what's out, what's allowable, what's not
Right.
allowable, or at least what's
Right.
fashionable and unfashionable.
Right.
Art expressions like opera, which used to be mainstream in the culture, many decades or hundreds of years ago, is still on the menu, right? But it's relegated to the bottom of the menu, the backside of the menu. It may be acceptable, but it's certainly not fashionable.
Right. I like that. I think one of the cultural things right now, even when I talk about the divination and witchcraft that's appearing in the Yoruba religion, but it's similar to all other religions and mythologies and pantheons of gods. And, so these elements, not only for the Black culture, but also for white culture, all these elements are resurging in our culture. And what's going to the bottom of the menu, so to speak, is Christianity.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's where people don't want, like, it's similar to like when popular sandwiches at a fast food restaurant. Once they lose their popularity, they go to the bottom of the menu where you got to look for them. And those who are, dedicated to a fish fillet, they're going to order the fish fillet regardless. But you know what I mean? Like it's just not a priority anymore. And I think that's what's happening now. And the culture is showing that in every piece of entertainment or artwork that it creates. It's just no longer Christian. It's not even modern. It's postmodern. You know what I mean? It's even the language, the words we use, the phrases we use. When we're saying things like my truth and this, live your truth, and that's her truth, this is our truth, as if truth is only relative to the individual, and there's no objectivity. Like all these things are happening and pervade in the culture every day, all the time. And even like social media has a lot to do with it too, because it's pushing, everybody has a voice. But I think that's a good working definition of what culture is. And I like that a lot. I like it a lot.
And just to kind of push the analogy a little further, like just as in a restaurant, every dish on the menu is produced by combining elements.
Yeah.
The omelet is a combination of egg and, if I am the one ordering it, bacon and onion, right? There are different elements. So also culture, every item on that menu is a combination of certain elements like art, and entertainment and law. What's legal, what's not legal is part of culture. Education, what children are taught in school. Language, like whether we speak English or some dialect of English here. We speak a different dialect than obviously they do in the UK. But even here in the United States, there are regional dialects too.
Right.
And religion is one of those elements too.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a popular figure like Beyonce uses an African religion to provide content for the art that she's making, she's just added a new ingredient in a sense
Yeah.
into
Yep.
the culture. And the
Yep.
more that ingredient becomes mainstreamed, the more acceptable it becomes.
Yep.
It becomes another competing option to the
Right.
Christian faith, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what's going on. As I said earlier, she's introducing a whole different way of looking at things, and it won't just be relative to the Black community, because the messages in what she's putting forth, they are messages that just relate to carnal man in and of itself. You know what I mean? So, it's not like she's introducing anything different. It's just that they're giving a license to these things, and then they're making it more culturally acceptable. Where Christianity, when it was culturally dominant, it made a lot of these things taboo.
So I was thinking about us as Christians, like it's a question you and I have already entertained in this show, but in this episode, but like, what is our approach as Christians to popular culture? And I kind of wrote down some different ones historically. One of them is either an abstinence approach to popular culture,
mm-hmm.
or I kind of put this, I kind of see these as a little bit separate, even though you're going to see the link. Like there's some people who advocate abstinence or ignorance of popular culture, and there's some who they're just into condemnation when it comes to popular culture, right? So this is the difference between, say, the Amish, who they're abstinent, right? They're ignorant. They've never heard of Beyoncé, I would imagine,
ever in their life,
and couldn't ever listen to her music even if they wanted to, because they don't have the technology to access it, right? So they're totally abstinent, they're totally ignorant. But then there are the kind of Christian fundamentalist groups that I'm from, where they're aware of these things and they advocate abstinence through condemnation. So it's not abstinence through ignorance, it's abstinence through, don't you dare listen to this, because it's going to corrupt your morals and it's going to turn you into a pagan worshiper, right?
Yeah.
So those are two: abstinence through ignorance, and maybe abstinence through condemnation would be the second one. Then there's what we might call critical or selective participation in these things.
Yeah.
And then there's some who say, no, we need to have actually a redemptive approach to it. So we enter into the making of popular culture to try to provide, if not an alternative, then maybe even a redemptive approach to it. We're trying to redeem it, to buy it back.
Right.
And then the final one is what I would just say immersion, which is unthinking.
Just in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, for me, I would be critical, and I would think that it's because of the music I make, the art that I make.
Yeah.
I actually engage in hip hop music,
right?
Christian rap. So I don't know if I'm necessarily trying to redeem it, but I do think I'm trying to provide an alternative that's saturated in the Christian worldview. So, but a part of who I am, and I'm always critical of the culture, and I try to put that in my music. So I'm always up on what's going on. I'm always, my ear is always to the streets. You know what I mean? That's what we say. I'm always trying to figure things out so that I can provide an answer from the Christian worldview to these things that's going on in the culture. Because honestly, people want it. People need it. Christians feel like they need something that relates to them and what they believe in. So I would say, for me, and I'm not, because I'm not saying that any other, the first two, the ignorance through abstination, or the abstination because of common, I wouldn't say, I don't know. When I think about that, when I really think about it right now, I don't think it's harmful to take the first, I don't think it's helpful, I should say, to take the first two approaches, because you're not engaging the culture, and Christianity always historically engaged the culture. So when you just withdraw from the culture, then what are you doing, like, as a Christian? But I don't want to say, in my mind, I don't want to say I'm trying to redeem it either. Right. You know what I mean? Because that brings to mind to me at least, the idea of what I reading in Christian history where people took pagan holidays and tried to Christianize them.
Right.
That's what redeeming them means to me. But in a sense, I'm doing that when I'm doing the music as well. So that's a tricky one for me when I think through it. But I would definitely say that I'm critical of it and that I'm trying to offer a alternative to what's out here. You know, right. that's I would definitely, and maybe not even an alternative, maybe a because even alternative can be a replacement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would say a replacement. Like I would want the people who engage with my music, I would want them to put the other music down and replace it. You know what I mean? That's what I would like. I don't even want to be an alternative. That's how I think.
Yeah. So you don't listen to other rappers, hip hop music, whatever.
The only time I listen to it, like if because, you know, new artists come out, the only reason I listen to anything popular is when I'm trying to hear the message that they're conveying, so I can know what my audience is listening to, so I can have an answer for it, and to know what's going on in the culture musically. Just the different elements of the music. What instrumentation are they using? What's popular, what's not popular? Because in the genre that I do, there are so many things that cater to so many different fan bases inside the genre. You know what I mean? So I just like to know sonically what's going on. But I always listen to the music now critically. Like I'm never listening to it for enjoyment. No, I haven't done that in years, where I just listen to it for enjoyment. Nope.
Okay, so that was my question, because like there's some people who, well, like especially from the fundamentalist approach that I came from, there are people who like will engage, they'll consume popular culture in order to tell you what's wrong with it. They're looking for, in other words, it's almost a research project.
Mm-hmm.
So they say. There were times when I would hear these people speak and I would think, I don't know, I think maybe your ministry it gives you cover to just consume this stuff because you enjoy it, you know, but whatever. Right. Not to cast any aspersions, but
right.
You know, there are some people who do that. They listen to, you know, they'll listen to this album or they'll watch this visual album by Beyoncé in order to take it apart and say,
mm-hmm.
you know, well, it teaches, you know, false religion and it's lewd and whatever mm-hmm. you might say about it. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but that's different than the critical or selective participation. I mean, most of us, even if we don't listen to popular music or watch popular, like, you know, a lot of fundamentalist Christians don't go to movies. They don't watch movies right. unless maybe just rated G movies or whatever.
Right.
And, they still do enter into other parts of culture, you know, like as we were saying last time, sports are okay.
Yeah.
Beyonce isn't, you know, like, but it seems like they don't realize that sports is reflective of and contributes to the change in culture as well.
Yes.
And it can be, it can offer its own temptations or sins just as much as something overt, like, you know,
what we've been talking about today.
Yeah. What we've been talking about today, like that kind of overt idolatry. So, and,
mm-hmm.
So I think that most Christians, and certainly anybody who could listen to or watch a podcast like this one, we all engage in culture to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
The question is whether we are critical, or whether we are trying to be redemptive, or whether we just immerse ourselves in it uncritically and, you know, without any discernment whatsoever.
Right. What thinking through that, as a pastor, what would you say would be the wisest way to approach popular culture, in all its facets?
Yeah, I think the critical / selective participation in it would be the best, because for each one of these I try to jot down, like, what is the good and what is the bad, or what is the benefit potentially and what is the risk. And when it comes to participating in popular culture, the benefit is you get to enjoy the best things that human beings produce.
Right.
you know, you don't have to be a great Christian to produce good music, to
Right.
be skilled as an instrumentalist or as a singer or whatever.
Right.
And in fact, the redemptive, which I don't know that we'll get to in this episode, but maybe someday we'll come back to it. There was a guy named Bob Briner who advocated redemptive entrance into popular culture. His thesis was, he wrote a book called Roaring Lambs. I don't know if you've heard of this or you're familiar.
Yeah, I have. Okay. I just never read it.
Yeah. So he was saying Christians ought to be the best musicians and the best athletes, and well, that hasn't been the case, you know?
Yeah.
And so by having some kind of critical participation, we do get to enjoy the best thing that human beings can produce. And I think that's the right way to go. But as a pastor and as a Christian, I think the temptation is that we expose ourselves to temptations in areas where we may not be strong enough
to, it's strong enough to ward them off.
Right.
Yeah. I would agree with that. This is another approach that I take to my music too. When you brought up the book about Christians should be putting their all into whatever artwork they make. We used to do that. We used to in centuries ago, the Christians were creating some of the most beautiful artwork that exists even to this day. Even when we talk about, you know, paintings, various paintings, or just the classical music.
Yeah.
Just some of the most beautiful things that have ever been created. I think we got away from it because of the withdrawal from culture.
Right.
You know, and so this is one of the things that one of the approaches that I try to make with my music. I'm trying to be the best Christian rapper that I can be. You know, I'm trying to put forth an excellent product every time I put something out. And I think this is part of the reason why I do listen to the music, because they're creating, for what it's worth, excellent artwork. They are. Now some of them don't, you know, with some of us it's just saying it's excellent just because of the name, you know. So I know when I can hear excellent music coming from a Christian or a non-Christian. So that's the thing that I try to pursue in my music every time I create something. That's why I take so much time writing my lyrics, and because lyrics are everything in what we do, you know, and what we do as Christian hip hop artists.
Right.
So you have to be excellent at it.
Now Kanye West has backed into since he was a very successful artist first before he became a Christian.
Right.
Now he's identifying as a Christian, and I'm not sure where he is lately because I haven't followed him that closely. But before COVID, he was, you know, having these Sunday services, which were very gospel. I listened to a couple of the albums that came out, and I actually went and saw the IMAX movie that they produced.
You did?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't.
Did you see it?
I haven't seen, no.
It was only in the theaters for one day here in Ann Arbor. So I saw it, and it was, you know, it was beautiful. It moved me to tears at
really
some point. It was only about 25 minutes long. That was kind of disappointing, but but it was beautiful in many ways. But so I don't know, you know, I guess I've lived long enough and I've seen this happen where famous people convert to Christianity, and then they don't persevere, and then they end up doing more harm than good, in the sense that they you know, end up renouncing the Christ and the Christian lifestyle that they once were committed to. That's my worry about him.
Yeah, see, it's interesting because he's a big cultural figure too.
Yeah.
So it's like, even when he dropped that album, he had Jesus is King trending on Twitter. You know what I mean? Just because of his cultural influence.
Right.
But I have a few reservations for that too, because it's like, I'm praying that Kanye's conversion is real.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm really praying for the best for him.
Yep.
But we have to wait and see. I know a lot of people that just open armed, and he didn't have to. He doesn't have to persevere. He doesn't have to, because he's Kanye, and that's my reservation with it. Like, there are Christian rappers, and I'm gonna be honest. Even though I like the album, that wasn't the best anywhere close to any of the other work he did prior.
His best work, right?
Yeah, like it's not even close. Like it's like, but we were just happy because he was, and I think that's part of the problem. Like it's when it goes back to creating excellence, you can have Kanye, who's been creating excellence as a secular artist for years, but then all he has to do is create a mediocre album for the Christians, and we love it. So that's part of my problem. And then there's guys that been creating art for the last, in my case, the last 5 years, and you know that sounds better than that. But just because he's Kanye, his artworks gets lifted up, which I can't say that it's wrong, because in all honesty, he's put in the work. He's been consistent in creating good art. Right. So you can't take that away from him. But Christians don't have the same enthusiasm for, other Christian artists.
When that came out, I read a review by some music critic. It might have been in Rolling Stone, I can't remember, but this person was pretty positive and said, named some of the songs and said, these sound pretty much like what you would expect from Kanye. It definitely said it wasn't his best work, but didn't pan it either and say it was terrible and, Christianity has ruined Kanye.
No, to me, it was a good album. He has a few songs on there, 3 or 4 songs on there that I was like, yeah, this is dope. You know what I mean? But then like, it's not a Kanye album. It's just not.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
I guess the part because I think I went and saw the IMAX movie first before I really knew about any of this stuff, but before I listened to any of the music. And I was surprised because he was putting his influence behind a highly refined type of gospel music. And I really didn't expect that. I expected to see a rap concert. Right?
Yeah. So, nah. Yeah.
So I was pleasantly surprised because I like gospel music in a lot of ways. Yeah. This was really good gospel music. I mean, the group that they put together is really
them kids can really sing. Yeah, them kids can really sing. Yeah, so that's and I think that's what we're talking about when you do something excellent. I don't know if Kanye is the picture, like he is the model, but when it comes to creating art, some of it is it's hard for us to do as Christian artists because we don't have the access to the funds, and this is Kanye. So if he says I want to do this, he's getting the best singers and
both the money that it takes to produce the best possible sounding version of your work and the network to get it distributed.
Yeah, to get it distributed to people.
Got, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I can't take nothing away from Kanye and what he did. You know what I mean? I just hope that his conversion is genuine, and I hope that he perseveres. And I'm really praying for Buddy. You know what I mean? Because people think he's crazy, and some of the stuff he's saying sounds crazy, but it's really not. It's just crazy to this culture. You know what I mean? Right. So I hope he perseveres.
Yeah, me too. So one of the texts that came to mind from scripture for me was Ephesians 5:11 and 12, which says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them.
Yeah.
It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. And I think that's the challenge for us, because evil things are becoming more and more mainstream through the influence of popular culture. And as we consume popular culture and feed its success by our consumption, and then show our children this is okay, even as culture becomes more and more sinful and more overt about its sinfulness, the temptation is, and I think the effect is, and I think we see this in the mega church, which is so entertainment oriented now, is that we end up fundamentally changing our subculture. The subculture of Christianity changes and becomes more worldly in the process.
Yeah. And that's always happening.
Yeah.
The kind of seeker-friendly tactics that individuals use to draw basically the unchurched, who are really not, they could not be saved at all. You know what I mean? But they're occupying church seats. And it's it's lucrative and it's entertaining, and they're growing their churches and they think that's God's will. But that's a tough one to kind of think through too. And it's unfortunate and actually sad sometimes, because a lot of people think that they are growing and that they're actually being fed when they're actually not.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And a
So
lot of people think
had,
they're Christians,
and they're not.
right?
And the sad, and one of the aspects about that is that you could have a genuine Christian
Right.
that goes to some of these churches, but they're not growing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or they're not. They stay ignorant in the faith. You know what I mean? So.
And that's the problem, is it gives you an acceptable alternative that even somebody who was raised in the faith can go to and be involved in, and it's a mainstream evangelical church, everything's fine.
Yep.
But they're not growing their faith. They're not being challenged, to mortify their sinful nature.
Yeah.
They're not being challenged about their materialism. They're not being challenged to really serve Christ and, witness for him. That's the danger too, as the church tries to look more mainstream.
Yeah.
And more culturally relevant, is that
we lose our salt.
Right.
And we lose our salt. And if the salt loses its saltiness, what good is it but to be trampled on by men? You know what I mean? Like, so that
once said, right?
Somebody famous,
yes,
who was famous at the time. You know what I mean? So that's that's the problem that we're running into. That's some of the problems that we're running into. So
yeah, we all have to live in a culture, even if it's a subculture of our own making. It has its own temptations. Even the Amish have their own temptations, their own sins. They have their own culturally acceptable sins. They have their own taboos. Every culture, if you interact with human beings, a culture is going to be created in that.
Yes.
So the answer, to some degree, is try to avoid the things that put you into a place of temptation.
Yeah.
But also, I think more relevantly, is learn to turn and run when you're in a place where you're being tempted, and definitely don't consume anything uncritically. Don't consume Bible teaching uncritically. Don't consume this podcast uncritically. Right. Don't consume popular culture, or even unpopular culture like traditional culture. Don't consume it uncritically, because Christ calls us to be sanctified in our thinking, and that we need to apply that sanctification to every area of our life.
Amen.
And every influence in our life.
Amen. Is this it?
I think that's a wrap for episode 4.
You think it's a wrap? All right, man.
Thank you, Doug. We will talk to you again next time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's King. Now, oh my goodness. Wow. This ain't going well. But we gonna make it work.